From way back, early 60s type time, the Pretlow Graham bloodline already had Elizabeth shook. Jersey knew their name long before the crack era stamped it in ink. 2 last names, 1 reputation, big bodies, heavy hands, and a habit of turning regular arguments into hospital visits and crime scenes. Folks didn't argue with them, didn't test them, didn't play tough in their presence. Everybody already understood the rules. But when the 80s rolled around and the 3rd generation decided to cash in on that family fear and step headfirst into the drug game, that's when their names stopped being local legend and became permanent criminal folklore. Bilal, Easy Pretlow, and Robert Wakil Pretlow were barely teenagers when life threw them to the wolves. 12 and 15 years old, 2 of 5 kids left behind by their mother, Katherine Jackson, who was drowning in addiction and couldn't keep her head above water, let alone raise children. Newark spit them out into the system. Foster homes, one place to the next, no roots, no stability, just moving pieces on a board nobody cared to win. By 15 and 18, Bilal and Wakil, along with their older brother Thomas Shamar Pretlow, ended up under the roof of their grandmother, Eleanora Sister Graham, tucked inside a subsidized complex in Elizabeth. That apartment became ground zero. What came with them wasn't just baggage, it was rage, survival instincts, and a family name that already rang bells in the street. Living with Sister didn't soften them. If anything, it sharpened them. School fights, party chaos, project beefs, anywhere they went, violence followed like a shadow. It wasn't random, it was expected. The Pretlow Graham name carried weight, and Bilal and Wakil made sure nobody forgot it. Once fear was established and dominance was clear, they pivoted. That's when the hustle started. Elizabeth, Newark, Linden, Rahway, they spread like oil stains on concrete. What began as teenage ambition turned into a full-blown trafficking operation. By the time people realized how serious it was, bodies were already attached to the name. Attempted murders, execution-style hits, whispers that turned into confirmed nightmares. The streets stopped guessing and started keeping count. They called it the E-Port Posse, named after the Elizabeth Port section where most of them came from. 2 distribution teams, structured, organized, ruthless. Later it split into E-Port Posse in Phase 2 with Bilal holding the reins on the latter. This wasn't chaos, it was hierarchy. Under Bilal's direction stood a long roster of soldiers and associates, every name a piece of the machine. Wakil's side of the house had its own lineup, each one knowing where they stood and who they answered to. Sean Hartwell was just 15 when Bilal scooped him up, young, impressionable, hungry for guidance. He looked at Bilal like royalty, and Bilal treated him like legacy. Sean became his right hand, his shadow, his project, rarely seen apart. What they had wasn't just business, it was blood without the paperwork. The streets dubbed them the King and his Prince, and nobody laughed when they said it. Vincent Jackson, first cousin but more like a brother, slid into Bilal's inner circle too. Newark raised him hard. Elizabeth finished the job. Another so-called black sheep bonded to Bilal and Wakil the same way their mothers once leaned on each other while scraping by in Newark. Pain makes families tighter. Crime made this one dangerous. Corey Grant came in even younger, 12 years old, already drifting, already lost. No supervision, no compass, just the street pulling him in. Authorities later tagged him as the enforcer, the one who made sure rules weren't suggestions. And there were rules. That's what surprised outsiders. No drugs for personal use. None. Participation meant discipline. Everybody came from broken homes, fractured childhoods, inner-city scars, but the code was non-negotiable. Structure was survival. Wakil, meanwhile, was doing college time at Drew University. Book smart and street aware. He preached education, demanded school attendance, checked homework. When Sean and Vincent got caught skipping classes, Wakil stripped them of their jewelry and cars without hesitation. Attendance snapped to perfect real quick. Together, E-Port Posse in Phase 2 worked relentlessly. Days blurred into nights, loyalty fueled exhaustion. Money stacked fast, hundreds of thousands a week, sometimes more. The streets were their office and they clocked in with pride. By the time it all came crashing down, estimates put their take between $3.5 and $5 million. Dirty money, fast money, empire money, built young, built violent, built to last, until it didn't. When the money started flooding in, it hit Bilal first, and it hit loud. He wore the success the way the streets expected. Heavy jewelry, bright flashes, proof of life pieces that announced his status before he ever opened his mouth. Everywhere he went, he was flanked by the baddest women and surrounded by engines idling, doors swinging open, another car, another night. But the shine wasn't just for show. That wasn't the part that defined him. What set Bilal apart was how freely the money moved once it touched his hands. He didn't just spend, it circulated. Kids on the block who looked like they were coming up short suddenly had new sneakers on their feet and fresh clothes on their backs, no questions asked. If someone looked like they needed, Bilal filled the gap. He didn't wait for gratitude or loyalty pledges. He gave because he could, and because in his mind, building people up mattered as much as stacking paper. He could have hoarded it. Plenty did. Instead, Bilal took pride in lifting others alongside him, especially his crew. Those same soldiers grinding every day suddenly found themselves on monthly shopping sprees, 30 outfits at a time, 30 pairs of sneakers per head, racks spent like it was nothing. It wasn't charity, it was investment, image, unity, power dressed in fabric and rubber soles. Cars became his real addiction. Whips weren't transportation, they were statements. He'd already cycled through heat, a canary yellow Eldorado Biarritz dripping with matching leather and chrome accents, an emerald green Peugeot 505 with tan interior, and other stylish rides that came and went. But the car everybody remembered, the one that turned heads before it even stopped, was the candy apple red Mercedes-Benz 190E, fully kitted, ground effects hugging the pavement, butter-soft tan leather inside, gold emblems gleaming under streetlights, gold BBS rims spinning slow. That car didn't roll, it announced. And if the Benz wasn't enough, there was the Sahara Desert Jeep, beige and green, bikini doors, soft top, a monster lurking under the hood, and an even louder monster in the back. That sound system was infamous. 25 15-inch woofers, Zeus and Thor amps pushing air so hard the town felt it in its chest. Blocks away, people already knew who was coming. House music booming, his name echoing through the hooks like a chant. Buying cars wasn't a phase, it was sport. In under a week, he scooped up 5 of the era's hottest rides, not just for himself, but for the team. Vincent Jackson got a white Maxima. John Brown rolled off in a black Regal. Wendell and Carnell Wilson got matching Audi 5000s, one gray and silver, the other blue and gold. Quadir Lee slid into a blue and silver Mercedes 190E. Andre Williams got his own red and silver Benz. Bilal didn't just ride clean, he made sure everybody around him did too. Wakil moved the same way, just quieter. He graduated from a Cadillac Seville to a black BMW 325 I loaded with the gold package, then leveled up again to a gold BMW 7 Series with black leather. Before long, the streets had a new nickname for him, the BMW Man. And like Bilal, Wakil spread the wealth. Corey Grant got a yellow-on-yellow Thunderbird. Muta Sessoms drove a Samurai Suzuki. Keith Cashwell pulled up in a lime green and gold Jetta, later trading that in for an aqua green Jaguar. They lived fast, but nobody mistook them for reckless amateurs. This wasn't playtime. July 24th, 1988 made that clear. That day, Bilal, Wakil, and Keith Griggs were accused of threatening 9 people at Pioneer Homes with machine guns. That same stretch of time, Alfonso Bird, a rival clocker, was beaten and robbed so badly he landed in the hospital for 3 days. These weren't isolated incidents. This was how control was enforced. Fear worked, until it didn't. For a long time, intimidation kept E-Port Posse and Phase 2 on top, dictating the flow, owning the corners, calling the shots. But fear breeds enemies. Envy hardened. Victims remembered faces. Families wanted payback. The same tactics that built the empire started steering it straight into law enforcement's crosshairs. At first, authorities didn't even realize what they were looking at. They didn't see a structured African-American crime organization run by teenagers. Undercover buys at Pioneer Homes, combined with non-stop complaints from fed-up tenants, cracked the door. A 9-month investigation followed. They called it Operation Pioneer, Union County Narcotics Strike Force, State Police, Elizabeth Police Detective Division, all aligned. Their conclusion was blunt. Most of the cocaine distribution in the area was being controlled by the Graham and Pretlow family. November 9th, 1988, 6 in the morning, doors kicked, sirens slicing through sleep, Pioneer Homes and Loomis Street lit up. Wakil, Shamar, Corey, Muta, Keith Griggs, Keith Cashwell, 29 others, all swept up, cars seized, Audi, Suzuki Jeep, Nissan Pathfinder, drug stacked, $67,000 worth of cocaine, cash, $31,000 weapons, a loaded .22 revolver, and a loaded double-barreled shotgun. 7 members of the Graham family taken in, including their grandmother's sister and their Aunt Marva. That's when the cracks started showing. Muta Sessoms was looking at 5 years, scared, cornered. He flipped. In a sworn statement, he said he was ready to stop, ready to face it, ready to save himself. He confirmed everything authorities suspected, and then some. He named names, drew lines, pointed directly at Bilal and Wakil as the architects. Operation Pioneer ballooned, phones tapped, warrants stacked, more doors kicked. November 25th, 1988, Swan Motel raid. 6 teenagers dropped, including Bilal, Corey, Dukan, and Jermaine Hartwell. Vincent, just 16, got stopped in a cab with a suitcase holding roughly 2 kilos of cocaine, $16,000 a brick. Packaging had already been moved to Linden to dodge heat. Didn't matter. Police still pulled $133,000 in cocaine and $72,000 in cash from a dresser drawer. Photos surfaced. Sean and Vincent posing beneath a banner reading E-Port Posse. The state came hard. Charges piled up. Leader of a trafficking network, running a drug manufacturing operation, possession with intent to distribute, using juveniles, selling within 1,000 feet of a school. The message was clear. If convicted, Bilal Pretlow was staring down life. December 22nd, 1988 came fast and unforgiving. Just 5 days after Bilal walked out of Union County Jail on a staggering $250,000 bail, the streets barely had time to breathe before the doors came crashing back in. Law enforcement stormed the Fulton Street house again, snatching up Bilal and Wakil in another hard raid. This time, the charges stacked higher. More drugs, more guns, and a defaced firearm. The kind of charge that drags the feds straight into your business. The raid didn't come out of nowhere. It was fueled by a steady drip of information, tips whispered into the right ears by one of Wakil's own, Muta Sessoms. By January 8, 1989, the violence had escalated beyond threats and intimidation. An attempt was made on Ricky Williams' life inside the Pioneer homes. The order came from above. Bilal, still locked in Union County Jail, had called for it. The command moved down the chain through Sean Hartwell, the second in command, until it landed in the hands of Keith Cashwell and Andre Williams. In a hallway that echoed with footsteps and fear, Keith stepped up on Ricky and fired once, the bullet tearing into his abdomen. When Andre saw Ricky still breathing, still alive, he barked another order, "Finish it." Keith raised the gun again, aimed for the head, but the weapon jammed. Metal clicked. Fate intervened. With no other choice, they ran. Ricky survived long enough to tell police exactly who shot him. Cashwell's name came out his mouth, and with that, warrants followed. Andre was pulled into it soon after. Word on the street was that Bilal had made it clear. If the hit didn't get done, Cashwell's mother would pay the price. Fear was currency, and it was spent freely. January 20th, 1989 brought more sirens. 3 apartments inside the Pioneer Homes and Migliore Manor housing projects were hit in coordinated raids. Narcotics detectives hauled out cocaine valued at $36,000, marijuana, scales, packaging, a handgun, and ammunition. 7 people were arrested, all tied, according to police, to the Pretlow Graham machine. The authorities spoke confidently to the press, saying they were striking again and again at the same organization, trying to snap its spine. Yet, in a twist of irony, none of the people arrested in those stash houses were actually members of E-Port Posse. March peeled back more layers. During discovery in the Operation Pioneer case, investigators got their hands on a statement Muta Sessoms had given them. Not long after that paperwork surfaced, Sessoms was found bloodied and beaten. He identified his attackers himself, Sean Hartwell and Wendell Wilson among them. Word traveled quickly back to Bilal and Wakil. Muta had talked. He was cooperating. The betrayal was confirmed. What happened next crossed from brutality into nightmare. While out on furlough from Union County Jail, Muta Sessoms was confronted. Bilal, Wakil, Corey, others, guns drawn. He was taken against his will to an apartment in East Orange. Inside, Muta begged. He swore he hadn't done anything. His pleas didn't matter. They sat him down on a couch and mocked him, scolded him, broke him down. Then came the hammer. Blow after blow crashed into his skull. When he fell, screaming for his life, the room went cold. Wakil picked up a machete and swung at Muta's neck. When it was over, they carried what was left of him into the bathroom, plugged in an electric saw, and went to work. It was said that Bilal paced the apartment afterward, Muta's head in his hand. The next day, Newark woke up to horror. 2 suitcases appeared miles apart, one on 9th Street between 11th and 12th Avenue, the other 5 blocks away on 14th Street, dragged home by children who thought it held food. Inside were pieces of a body, no head, no hands, no feet. The bloodshed didn't stop. April 23rd, 1989, Marvin Buckman's body was found tied to a pole near a park on 18th Street in Newark. He had been riddled with bullets, 18 of them. Investigators would later connect the killing to the same organization, casting a shadow over the city. By May, the brothers were back out again. Bilal on $500,000 bail, Wakil on $250,000. They gathered roughly 50 drug dealers inside a Chinese restaurant in Linden. It was almost surreal. Laughter, food, a magician performing tricks. Then the mood shifted. The brothers spoke openly about their plans to dominate drug trafficking in Elizabeth. Bilal made it plain, anyone who didn't fall in line would face consequences. June 14th, 1989 sealed the pattern. Melanie Baker's body was found in Newark. She had been shot 4 times in the head at point-blank range. Law enforcement believed the killing traced back to Corey Grant, Wakil Pretlow, Irving Bethia, and Bilal himself. By then, the streets knew. This wasn't random violence. This was systematic, ruthless, and it was spiraling toward an end that nobody could outrun. There were always whispers circling the death of Melanie Baker, stories sliding through the streets like smoke with no clear source. One version said she got too close to the fire, caught up with one of the E-Port posse members, and stumbled onto a serious stash inside one of their many safe spots. Word was, she took the money and went wild with it, burning through cash on a shopping spree loud enough to get noticed. Another story said the money was handed to her, 60 bands and straight drug proceeds meant to be held, not touched. But temptation got the best of her, and the money disappeared fast. One voice from inside the circle summed it up cold and simple. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Whatever really happened died with her. Only Melanie and the ones who pulled the trigger know the truth. Around that same time, another familiar name crept back onto the Elizabeth scene. Bobby Ray Davis had resurfaced after doing a long stretch upstate. Before prison, he was known as the Heroin King, a heavy presence in the streets and behind the walls. After his return, he sat down with Bilal and Wakil. A deal was struck. Davis and his people could move heroin in peace, but cocaine was off limits. That lane belonged to E-Port Posse, no exceptions. The truce didn't last. Not long after the agreement, E-Port Posse caught members of Davis's crew pushing coke inside the Pioneer homes. That crossed the line. Words were exchanged, tensions snapped, and the response was brutal. The message had to be clear, and it was delivered with force. Early on the morning of July 9th, 1989, Jeanette Griggs was beaten viciously by Bilal, Sean, and others for selling cocaine in the Pioneer homes for someone outside the Pretlow operation. The punishment was meant to echo. That same night, around 10:45 p.m., the streets answered back. Bobby Ray Davis, Walter Ray-John Griggs, Jeanette's brother, and Maurice Crowley, who was dating Jeanette at the time, caught Wakil on 1st Street, right in front of the Pioneer homes. Shots rang out. Wakil was hit multiple times and collapsed, bleeding out in the arms of Sean Hartwell. Chaos followed. That same night, Sean, Irvin, and Bilal armed up heavy and went hunting. Rage took the wheel. They moved fast, reckless, ignoring Wakil's own warnings about what this path would bring. Before they could reach anyone, police intercepted them a few blocks from the shooting scene. All three were arrested on gun possession charges. At first, police thought Sean Hartwell was responsible for Wakil's death. He was covered in Wakil's blood, but that theory didn't hold. Wakil wasn't just a partner to Sean, he was family, a brother in everything but blood. The next day, July 10th, 1989, the retaliation came. Wendell Wilson and Thomas Shamar Pretlow, the oldest of the Pretlow brothers, tracked Bobby Ray Davis down as he stepped out of his car in front of his home. Shamar fired. Davis went down hard. Shamar walked right up to him and emptied the remaining 3 rounds from a .357 revolver into his head. It was final. The other 2 men tied to Wakil's murder, Rajon Griggs and Maurice Crowley, vanished. They didn't just run from the police. They ran from the inevitable payback they knew was coming. Wakil Pretlow and Bobby Ray Davis were buried a day apart. Hundreds came out for both funerals, showing love and respect to 2 figures who carried serious weight in the streets. Media cameras crowded the scene. Police stood thick and armed, watching closely, expecting blood to spill again. Bilal couldn't attend Wakil's funeral, but he made sure his presence was felt. He sent a gold medallion shaped like a king's crown to be placed around Wakil's neck. The streets whispered that Bilal also paid a heavy price to have Wakil buried in a 14-karat gold casket, though that part was never confirmed. What was confirmed was this. By then, the streets of Elizabeth were soaked in grief, fear, and unfinished business, and nobody believed it was over. By the summer of '89, the walls were closing in. On July 26, 1989, Bilal Pretlow stood before the court and copped out to 3 narcotics charges, cutting a deal that wiped away 17 more. The most dangerous charge, the one naming him as the head of a full-blown narcotics empire, was quietly dismissed. In return, the hammer came down heavy but calculated, 20 years in the box with a chance at parole after 7.5. It looked like the end, but it wasn't even close. Power doesn't always disappear when the doors slam shut. With Bilal locked down, Sean Hartwell rose into position as the official underboss. The streets knew the truth, though. Bilal was still pulling strings. Prison didn't mute his voice, it just changed the channel. Orders traveled through lieutenants, coded conversations, and favors bought behind the walls. He was said to be moving like a commissary kingpin, buying 40 to 50 pairs of sneakers in a single week, along with clothes for other inmates, all to secure uninterrupted access to the phones. In that world, silence cost money, and Bilal was still paying wholesale. Outside, the violence didn't slow. On August 20th, 1989, Corey Grant caught up with Dion Lee at the Pierce Manor housing project. Words turned physical. Corey pistol-whipped Lee, cracking him upside the head. The allegation was that Corey was supposed to finish it. Shots fired as Lee ran, but that part didn't happen. Not that it mattered. 9 days later, Dion Lee's brother, himself deep in the drug game, was gunned down. Police labeled it another E-Port posse body, another territorial message written in blood. Corey Grant and James Raheem Holman were said to be the shooters. The heat was unbearable now. On September 6, 1989, after a warrant dropped in connection with the murder of Mario Lee, Corey Grant turned himself in. He was still under 18 and knew exactly what that meant. This wasn't surrender, it was strategy. He was trying to dodge adult prosecution before the system swallowed him whole. By October, the feds were listening. Wiretaps out of Union County Jail lit up with chatter. One call in particular caught attention. Talk of roughly $100,000 headed to a bail bondsman in Montclair for Thomas Shamar Pretlow. On October 23rd, surveillance teams moved in. At 1:06 p.m., Vincent Jackson rolled up to the bondsman's office with Samad Pretlow, Bilal's youngest brother and a great uncle. As soon as they stepped out, law enforcement closed ranks, weapons low but ready, ordering hands on the car. A pat-down turned up cash, $2,054 in Vincent's pocket, about the same on the uncle. Eyes then went to the trunk. Someone had pulled out a goldish vinyl bag. The bag got locked down while agents waited for a warrant. A canine didn't need paperwork. The dog hit on it immediately. When it was finally opened, the count came in heavy, $104,047 in U.S. currency. Vincent was handed a DEA receipt like a souvenir from a funeral. Less than a month later, on November 13th, 1989, the hammer really fell. Federal DEA agents teamed up with city and county narcotics units in a coordinated sweep dubbed Operation Glass Slipper. The name came straight from Bilal's lawyer, who'd compared his client to Cinderella, trapped in a fantasy that was about to end at midnight. 31 people tied to the E-Port posse went down in the raids, including Wendell and Carnell Wilson and Antonio Malik Jones. Even behind bars, Bilal caught new charges, running the organization from inside Union County Jail. His phone calls monitored, his words turned into evidence. Now the dragnet widened. Authorities linked the group to the murders of Bobby Ray Davis, Mario Lee, Melanie Baker, and Muta Sessoms, plus the attempted murders of Dion Lee and Ricky Williams. Warrants stacked up, the streets emptied. On November 14, 1989, Vincent Jackson followed Corey's playbook and turned himself in while still under 18, hoping juvenile status might soften the blow. It wouldn't. By December 19, 1989, Sean Hartwell was finally caught after more than a month on the run. Elizabeth Detective Thomas Swan stood before the cameras and declared, "Now the E-Port posse is completely finished." Sean was charged as a kingpin by the state of New Jersey. The federal system came next. On July 27, 1990, a grand jury in the District of New Jersey dropped a sweeping indictment. 7 defendants, including Bilal Pretlow, Sean Hartwell, and Irving Bethia, facing more than 35 counts of drug trafficking, violence, and racketeering. A month later, on August 23, 1990, Corey Grant, 15, and Vincent Jackson, 16, were slated to be transferred and prosecuted as adults under the Federal Juvenile Delinquent Act. Childhood was officially over. On January 25, 1991, the government doubled back with a superseding indictment. 9 defendants now. Same names, same core, same charges, drug trafficking, violent crime, racketeering, layered thicker than before. Bilal, Sean, and Vincent were hit with continuing criminal enterprise charges under USC 848. Bilal caught the worst of it. 848E, a capital charge carrying the death penalty. One chapter of the E-Port posse was closing, and it was closing hard. In July 1991, a judge severed Bilal's capital case from the others, granting a joint defense motion. His trial would stand alone. It made history. The first death penalty case tried in New Jersey under the new federal law for drug-related murders, and only the second in the nation. The defense cried foul. Bilal's attorney accused federal prosecutors of systematically purging black jurors from the panel, claiming they scrutinized only black candidates. The fear, according to the defense, was simple. The Pretlow-Graham family tree ran deep, and the E-Port posse still commanded loyalty and fear in the community. No one wanted a sympathetic face in the jury box. During the death penalty phase, the Daily Journal reported on a wiretapped call. Bilal, asked by his girlfriend Latiesha Drakes what he'd do if he had to face the maximum, didn't hesitate. "I'll take the death deal," he said, "and before I die, I'll say, stick me." Bilal's trial began November 12, 1991. It never finished. On January 3, 1992, proceedings halted following his alleged suicide. The courtroom froze. The legend collapsed in silence. Jury selection for Vincent Jackson, Corey Grant, and Irving Bethea kicked off February 28, 1992. By May 13th, after convictions piled up across state and federal courts, jurors returned guilty verdicts on RICO conspiracy and substantive RICO violations. Vincent Jackson was branded a federal kingpin. Months earlier, in December 1991, Sean Hartwell, just 18, had already been sentenced to 23 and 1/3 years on a federal kingpin charge that trumped the state case. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked why he'd refused a 5-year deal. Sean didn't blink. "I would never tell on my brothers." And with that, the E-Port posse passed from street legend into court record, etched not in rumor but in indictments, sentences, and silence. November 9th, 1992 came down like a steel door slamming shut. That was sentencing day. No suspense left, no room to breathe. Vincent stood there and caught 33 and 1/3 years. Corey didn't get years at all. He got life, federal time, forever time. The paperwork said drug trafficking and racketeering, but the weight was heavier than that. Vincent was tagged for conspiracy to murder Anthony Hasim Martin. Corey was nailed for the murder of Mario Lee and the attempted murder of Dion Lee. Ink on paper, but everybody in the room knew this was blood math. The newspapers loved the moment. They said both Vincent and Corey cursed the judge right to his face. Vincent allegedly shrugged it off like it was nothing, telling him, "Come on, man, give me what you're gonna give me." No begging, no bending. Corey was colder. He reportedly said, "I have no respect for a man in a dress," looking straight at the robe. That was the kind of energy in the room. No remorse, no fear, just raw defiance. Later on, Irvin Bethea caught his own life sentence from the feds for the role he played in the organization. Another door slammed, another name erased from the streets. The collapse didn't stop there. Case after case tied to the E-Port posse takedown ended in long state and federal sentences. Prosecutors believed the real number was higher, that another 20 to 30 members, mostly juveniles, slipped through the cracks untouched. Names still echoed though: Antonio Malik Jones, Hussamidi Hussam Williams, Andre Andy Williams, Keith Cashwell. Family got pulled in too. Terrence Tareem Terry Graham, one of Bilal's uncles, James Sonny Jackson, a great-uncle, Marva Graham, Bilal's aunt, and Eleanor's sister Graham, his maternal grandmother. Blood ties didn't protect anybody. If anything, they tightened the net. Marva and Mrs. Graham both pled not guilty to charges coming out of the Operation Pioneer raid. They went to trial anyway. Both were found guilty. It didn't matter that Raymond Graham Jr. took the stand and said the drugs were his, swearing his mother and sister didn't know a thing. The jury didn't buy it or didn't care. Mrs. Graham's lawyer begged for mercy, painting her as a mother and grandmother with no prior convictions, on medication, not a criminal. Marva's lawyer asked for probation too, saying her role was limited, her record clean. The judge listened, then dropped the hammer. December 15th, 1989. 8 years for one, 7 for the other. The judge said it was unfortunate, but the jury had decided that Mrs. Graham produced and nurtured 2 drug dealers, her son Raymond Graham Jr., and her grandson Bilal Pretlow. He also pointed out that Marva Graham somehow had income without welfare or legitimate employment, no sympathy left in his voice. Then came the part nobody could make sense of. When Bilal Pretlow was found hanging in his cell under supposed 24-hour surveillance, questions flooded the air. Mrs. Graham said she'd spoken to him the Saturday before, said he sounded fine, said he was in good spirits. She asked the question nobody could answer. Why didn't anyone notice his bedsheet was missing? She didn't believe it, not for a second. "No," she said flat out. "I don't believe he hung himself." Even people in the street said the same thing. Quiet voices, shaking heads. "That's crazy, that's not Bilal." One of his lawyers, David A. Runke, backed that up. He said he'd spent hours with Bilal on Christmas Eve. Said he was upbeat, alert, not broken, not spiraling. No signs, no farewell energy. "It's just an awful thing," Runke said. "He wasn't an animal or a monster. He wasn't what the government portrayed him to be." City Hall didn't share that sentiment. Elizabeth Mayor Thomas G. Dunn spoke without hesitation. To him, it was over. "All I can say is justice has been served at his own hands," he told the press. He didn't hide it, didn't soften it. "I wish I could express some feeling of sadness," he said, "but when one knows all the damage, destruction, and other human heartbreaks that Bilal caused, I find nothing within my heart to express sorrow." And just like that, the story closed the way these stories usually do, not with answers, but with sentences, graves, and silence.